Well, you're watching The Last Word. Tonight on the program, we are tackling a topic that sparked debate across the nation. Narayan Murthy's call for a 70-hour work week. He said it again. Is this a blueprint for success in India's quest for development or a step back into an era of overwork? Join us as we explore the implications of this proposition on the average Indian's pursuit of a balanced life. Is there anything like that? We'll bring you insights from industry experts, mental health professionals, and the voices of the workforce itself. How does this fit with modern demands for flexibility, mental well-being, and the right to leisure? Does productivity really increase with longer hours, or are we risking our health and family time? Stay tuned as we dissect this contentious issue and what it means for work-life balance in today's fast-paced world. Joining us now, B.S. Murthy, CEO of Human Capital, Priya Chetty Rajgopal, the founder of Multiversal Advisory, Shantanu Roots, the founder and CEO of Team Lease EdTech. I'm also joined by Dr. Kapil Kakkar, a psychologist, author, and corporate consultant. Mr. B.S. Murthy, the argument which was made by Narayan Murthy, one among many, was that those who have received subsidized education owe it to less fortunate citizens to work extremely hard. He also says that he's received positive feedback from many, including people around the world. Are we obliged to work harder because some are potentially less privileged than us?
Vishnu, thank you for having me. My first context is that what makes anybody think that people are not working hard?
Yes.
Except for a sector like information technology or maybe banking, most of the India typically works 6 days a week. And effectively, I think by default, almost all of them, I would say, put in anywhere between 60 to 70 hours of work as of now, as we speak. And that's real hard work. It was basically the IT about 30 years back that they moved on to a 5-day week. But then necessarily in the context of today, the work needs to be far more smarter, far more productive. That does not necessarily mean that you put in the hours. Hours make little sense in the context today that on the other side, if you look at it, somebody working from home today is actually putting in more than 70 hours. So what Narayan Murthy sir has been saying is already on the cards actually.
And no, on the other side, what you're okay with 60, 70 hour work weeks. You're fine with that?
No, I don't think the increasing number of hours are just for sake of hard work is productive anywhere, anywhere for that matter. Some of the most productive economic systems are people where they have a work-life balance. And I think there has to be a very focused, and it's a right of every human, working human, to have a work-life balance. I think I'm not in the context of agreeing to a 70-hour work week.
Okay. Let me go across to Priya Chetty Rajgopal. Priya, just going through a list over here. The Netherlands, the average work hours are per week 29 to 32 hours. Denmark 32.5 to 37.2. Norway 33.6 to 38. The argument that productivity goes up if you work more isn't necessarily correct. Even Germany, which is among the most productive countries in the world, averages around 34.6 to 39.5 hours, right? Productivity is not linked to the number of hours that you work.
True that. I think the new tech age clearly proves that. I don't think the time you spent is directly proportional to the kind of impact or results that you produce. Having said that, I mean, all of us have the greatest respect for Mr. Narayan Murthy. He has done an incredible job in building one of the most well-known Indian companies. So I think his point of view is his point of view. And also one must remember that he is not exactly 21. He's worked for a number of years and over several generations, several, what is the word for it, different kind of work, times of work focus. And he's built a company. So his point of view, can be respected. But I do understand that when he speaks, the assumption is that his point of view or his vision of the work ethic is expected to be followed by other people. It's no different from me saying this is how I work and I want everybody to follow what I'm doing.
No, but Priya, I think when Narayan Murthy says something, given his stature in this country as an industrialist, people sit up and take notice, and we're talking about it. And I think a lot of people out there feel either terribly outraged by what he has said, or they agree with what he is saying, right?
Yeah. No,
and
I
all my
think
panelists tonight are incredibly diplomatic, which is fine. That's your prerogative. But is it right to be working 70 hours a week?
I don't think it is right at all, because without a balance, you're just going to flounder. There's no question about it. All of us have gone through it. I've done the weird hours. I work 24 hours a day when it's required. We've all gone through it. I mean, let's not get away from that. But is that desirable? Certainly not. I think it is bad for your health. It's bad for your mental well-being. It's bad for your family. So there is a certain balance that one is needed. So I completely agree on that front. Generational respect has to be given, that somebody, you come from a different era. I come from a different era. I mean, I remember the times that I worked and I assumed a 6-day week was normal. Today, I moved into a 5-day week and I love it, because for me, the first time I can look at a weekend and really look forward to that. And I know what a difference it makes to me. So what works for X does not always work for Y. And most importantly, it does not always impact the economic indices of the country. I don't really believe that is entirely the case. The point that he makes is interesting. Is it's not just about work, the work culture, work ethic. He makes a point that we owe it to the less fortunate to kind of put in our hours. I'm not too sure what that really means, so I'm going to sort of think about that a bit. But from a point of view of the future, and especially given the case of Anna, given the case of many people who are, sort of thrown into the deep end, where the work culture can be very toxic, depending on the boss or the company that you join, I think the conversation about it is very, very important.
Okay.
So this conversation, I agree with you, takes the attempt to move forward way back. Look at the MVA manifesto, for example. It mentions a right not to be disturbed or a right to disconnect. You're talking about a different level of focus, where if somebody calls you after 5:30, you have a right not to take the call. We all have
That's
joint
frankly
ownership.
quite unimaginable in any part of the economy in India. It is very much the case. My friends tell me in Australia that they don't take calls when after a certain period of time.
Yeah.
But Mr. Shantanu Rooj, what strikes me is that we've got a device on our phones called WhatsApp. That's changed the way all of us work across
Very
industries. So there is nothing which is really a shift anymore, right? Where you come physically into office, work for an X number of hours, and then go home, because you are expected to constantly work, because if there is information that needs to be provided, or decisions which need to be taken, or things you need to be aware of, there is that machine which is constantly telling you, please look at me. And if you aren't doing that, you are considered to be inefficient, right? Now that's a huge problem, right? Isn't it? That modern technology actually deters us or takes away the opportunity from so-called work-life balance.
Vishnu, you're right, actually. If you look at it today, there is a blurring, the lines between office and home is actually a lot blurred today. What employers care about is actually productivity and resilience, right? So today, if you see, I mean, in the age-old time when people possibly only meant to work when they went to offices, I think that's the time you measured number of hours spent at work, number of hours spent at the office. But in today's time, where everybody is wired, your office is something that you carry home every day, I'm not too sure how do you measure your work timings in this particular case.
Exactly.
Employers do not care about number of hours at all.
Right.
Dr. Kapil Kakkad, I wake up to WhatsApp. I start working on WhatsApp at 7:30 in the morning. I get to work at about 2 p.m. and I reach home at 11 p.m. 5 days a week. This is the fact. I'm 50 years old. Am I headed to burnout?
See, again, I'll first like to address that question also, besides yours. See, Mr. Narayan Murthy, we have to understand, is a self-made man, and he became an entrepreneur. Now, when you are an entrepreneur, the level of passion and the drive can take you to extremes. Because as an entrepreneur, you need to ensure that your resources, including time, has to be managed exceptionally well. And that is where I think if the suggestion of Mr. Murthy would have been to the promoters, to the management of the organizations, to the startups promoters, it would have made a lot of sense to me, but they themselves are more motivated.
Right.
But telling this primarily to people who are in the middle management and lower management might be a little too harsh, for a simple reason. Today, even for the HR, if you look at it, when the offer letter is given to the people, the HR has to, in fact, run after those guys, those candidates, to ensure that these people actually join. Because during Mr. Murthy's time, a job was a necessity. Today, with as many options as people have in today's corporate world, if you are specially competent, a job has become a luxury. You have a lot of choices with you. So I think that is where we need to understand that 70 hours a week. And one more thing, in fact, the other day I was looking on LinkedIn, and someone shared a WhatsApp message saying to the boss that I would be coming tomorrow at 11:30 because I am leaving today at 8:30 p.m. So this person is not asking is not asking to the boss, but informing the boss that I would come at 11:30. There was another incident very recently where a person, a new candidate, on the first day of joining, he resigns on day one because he is asked to stay back for a little longer. Now he says, because we are dealing with Generation Z, so his take was, A, my consent was not taken. Secondly, if I am not being paid overtime, why should I be staying back? So saying this, working 70 hours, even if people start working 70 hours, the question is, are they going to stay in that organization? Because toxicity is also going to come in by default, especially when like you rightly said, like in Europe, they are working for 35 hours in a week. And if in India we are working for double the time in a week, you can imagine the kind of trauma the people would think of. That is one part. The second part I also wanted to say was that multitasking has become the key today for any organization. Now, organization would like to have people who can do A, B, C, and D work. They would say, we will give you a salary of 1.5 times, but we will want to take out work for 2 times. But just giving this entire thing a little more stroke, I don't know whether you are aware of it or not, it's come today only. Elon Musk, he says he's looking for people who are willing to work for 80 hours for Department of Government Efficiency in US. So forget 70 hours. Elon Musk is looking for people who are ready to work in US for 80 hours. But this is all about passion. The question is see, there's a general say, as per the Pareto's principle, 80% of the organization is run by 20% people, and 20% of the organization is run by 80% of the people. So if we are talking about those 20% people who are running the 80% of the organization, it makes sense in the sense, yes, they are.
Right, so that doesn't necessarily apply to everyone. Hang on a second, Doctor. Let me bring in my other panelists also. B.S. Murthy, one of the points that Mr. Murthy said is, despite the backlash that he's faced, what he said that he's asked for a cultural transformation towards becoming a highly determined, disciplined, hardworking work culture in India. He says that this change is necessary for India's progress. So he equates discipline and determination with hard work. Does that make sense?
I think these are very common successful traits that each and everybody should have necessarily. I fully agree with Narayan Murthy on that. But on the other side, somebody like Murthy saying that 70-hour work is a kind of a must or so, you look at it from an entrepreneurial point of view. Who are the people who are saying this? Your Ola CEO, our Infi CEO, or others. I mean, these are highly driven people who have seen phenomenal success in their lives. Phenomenal success, whether it is fiscal, whether it is societal, every part of it. I think they're fundamentally driven by work. That is not the case. So for an average human being working in a factory or average human being working in a tech company or any other company, I think the rewards to the efforts of work and the time is very different when you look at an entrepreneur, successful entrepreneur, or somebody working in an office.
Sure.
I think by default in an Indian context, people necessarily do work more than 40 hours. But on the other side, is overtime compensated in India? No. Except for your factory environment, nowhere outside the Indian industry, overtime is compensated. They don't pay for it. They want you to work, but they don't pay for it.
Sure. Shantanu, Priya, I wanted to come back to you on a point. work from home in India is very often just an excuse from getting people to work much more, because it's not always exclusively work from home. You have to spend a certain number of days at work as well. If you add all of that up, all of the time that you're actually saving is the time for commute. That might be significant, but it hardly compensates. The point is that you might actually be working many more hours with a hybrid work from home and work from office model, which is what most companies follow.
Yes. So my response would be, what are the choices we have? The COVID has kind of pushed us into a situation where it wasn't so much of a choice; it was something that we had to do. And eventually, the way it has morphed very clearly is something that is not going to change in a while, whether it's real estate prices or it's commute time or it's flexibility or whatever. Don't forget, there was a time when people were actually asking for work from home as an option. Today, it's become, kind of a burden to bear. The fact is, whatever we do, there is a kind of almost like a buffet. We need to have what is fair and basic and universal to all, which is either a 5.5 day or a 5 day, 40 hours a week. We need to have that as your base. In addition, whatever people do because they're driven by results, or you're the entrepreneur, or you're at CXO level, or you're heading a sensitive function, really will depend on the person who's doing this. Don't forget, while all of us are conscious of work-life balance and having a kind of a structured approach to it, because it's all very well wanting to work harder, but it's not so good to be told to work yourself, to the bone and collapse somewhere. And we have had very, very visible instances of that.
Yeah, all the time.
Really,
in fact, Dr. Kakkar, there is something to be said about age in all of this, right? You aren't 20 for your entire working career unless you want it to be that way. You tend to become a bit older, where working 70, 80 hours is physically extremely difficult.
Yes.
Do workplaces care about that at all in the Indian context?
See, absolutely. In fact, at times I am, astounded to an extent when I see the judges of the Supreme Court, the retirement age is 65. If you look at it, any person after the age of 45 would have diabetes, blood pressure, various stress these givers in his life, and the health would get compromised. Now the question is, your efficacy, your efficiency, your productivity by default is going to come down after a certain age. Your span of attention is going to take a hit. Now the question is, that is what the point is. If somebody is in a middle level management or a lower level management, that person will certainly not be able to cope up with that 70 hours of thing, because his motivation level is also not there, because he's fighting with all the other things around him. The family. See, if you look at it, what is the meaning of work-life balance? Work-life balance is, how do I identify my role vis-a-vis my work, vis-a-vis my family, and vis-a-vis myself? If I think that I am not cohesive and I'm not comfortable with these three aspects, my work-life balance takes a hit. If you look at the World Health Organization in 2020, they identified burnout as an occupational hazard, wherein they talked about exhaustion and cynicism affecting the employee's productivity. And that is where we need to see that it is not only age is certainly a factor, but apart from age, the kind of environment that is given to us. Now we talk about flexi work hours. Now, see, flexi work hours is okay for people from the IT or HR, but imagine a person working in a manufacturing sector. He does not have that luxury of, flexi work hours.
Right.
So it has to be identified from certain segment and department. It cannot be a blanket rule that, okay, flexi works for everyone.
Got it. Shantanu Ruj, is there a case to be made for legislation which actually ensures that we can work for a certain number of hours and no more? Do you believe that in our thinking that is anywhere feasible? It just seems such a Western concept.
No, right. There is a case for that. For example, let's look at it from the factory workers, people in like blue-collar workers, who actually are measured by, you can't actually keep them for 12 hours inside a factory, right? So there are legislations for that. But if you look at knowledge workers, your white-collar workers or a gray-collar workers, productivity is not measured by the number of hours that you put in, right? So the yardsticks for measurements have changed at this point in time. And as the lines between the office and home has started blurring, people are wired all the time, productivity is all the place. I think measuring the number of hard work just by number of hours being put together looks like a decade-old metric to be measured on. I think times have changed now. And after COVID has ensured that all of these are climate change. They are not just passing showers.
B.S. Murthy, your views on whether there needs to be legislation along the lines of what several leading economies in the world do. We are much larger than these economies, way larger than them, to try and ensure that our citizens have something to live for besides work?
Absolutely, Vishnu. I think culture in terms of work, I think all offices need to stop work at 5 p.m. and people should go home. And the second part is manufacturing industries in blue collar have occupational health experts inside the premises. Organizations in tech which have 1 lakh, 2 lakh people don't have occupational health specialists working inside their campuses. See the dichotomy there. That way. So an organization which earns less, typically people work 6 days a week and they have occupational health specialists. Organizations which earn more, which make billions of profits, don't have occupational health support for their own employees. And anyway, for the average white collar now, the work is stretched into home. Necessarily the hours that is being currently put is far more than 60 or 70 hours that I could basically see. So I think there is some kind of a legislation is required that maybe do not call after 6 or do not call after 5 or switch off on weekends. Something like that should be a right until unless there is some emergency that it needs to attend to. I'm all for it.
Priya, final word to you. Do you believe that in our gigantic middle class, millions of people working, the concept of family which we grew up with when we were younger, is disintegrating? That children, perhaps on account of both parents working, particularly in our cities, suffer a great deal. They perhaps don't get the same attention that we did from our parents.
Yes. I agree. And I want to make 2 points here, actually, both somewhat contrary. The time that we spend, the hours that we're putting in, whatever we're talking about right now, takes away from the fact that our success also depends on the company's success depends on us. So if there is a disconnect or a lack of focus or a lack of effective time that is spent, the company loses and eventually so do we. So that's one thing where I think the big picture has missed out the fact that employees are, and if they're rightly motivated, are invested in the success of the company, and therefore what they do in terms of work will reflect that. So that is one thing I want to leave on the table. The second thing is, and bringing your point of, how families have structured themselves and how things have changed, nobody goes back. We progress as a nation. We've got some of the most amazing demographics in the world. We've got a younger and younger generation who's questioning, seeing a lot of opportunity, etc.
Yeah.
So we won't go back from X number of hours to, to 70 hours. I mean, that's not going to happen. I mean, there's no question about it. So we can discuss all we want. The related part of this is the definition of success, today. And increasingly, we, as a slightly older generation, are finding out the definition of a success for a younger person or of happiness is very different.
No, it is.
So you're not going to aspire to this phenomenal CEO job, which is going to kill you.
All right, Priya, I'm going to interrupt you now because I think you've struck upon a theme we need to discuss later on much more. How does one define success in the context of a modern workplace? I'm out of time. Thank you both. Thank you all of you very much for being with us.